Good evening. I am Brandy Burnwald, the Director of Alumni Relations at Ferris State University, and thank you for tuning in for our March Alumni Social Hour, a virtual wine tasting. Tonight, we're going to learn the story of wines and compare unique varieties grown in northern Michigan as one of our very own, Meridith Lauzon, takes us through 5 different wines made right in Traverse City at Left Foot Charley. For those of you that did some shopping and pre-ordered your wines or perhaps picked up some local varieties, I hope you have your bottles nearby and maybe have prepared your own charcuterie board so that you may follow along from the comfort of your own home and taste and sample as we go. If not, no worries. Simply sit back, settle in for a fun and informational presentation this evening. You can find the link to Left Foot Charley under resources or in the comment section in Facebook. Feel free to check out their website at any time and order in the future or whenever your heart desires. The presentation will be roughly an hour. At any time, you can click the Ask a Question button near the bottom of your screen, or if you're following along on Facebook Live, feel free to post a question in the comments section. We will try to answer questions as we go, but there will always be time at the end of the presentation as well. And now, a little bit about our special guest this evening. Meridith Lauzon received an associate's degree in hotel and restaurant management with a minor in special event and meeting planning from Ferris State University in 2010. Originally a Grand Rapids native, Meredith found her way to Traverse City shortly after graduation when she was offered a job as tasting room manager at Left Foot Charley. Today, she currently serves the role as operations manager. In this role, she's responsible for wine club management, communication, and creative systems to ensure that they are maintaining a clean, happy, productive, and professional environment for wine tasting. And with that, I now turn it over to Meredith to begin the presentation and introduce her special guests for the evening.
I think Meredith internet is down just for a moment here, but she'll be on shortly. But I'd oh, there she is. I'd love to brag about her. I'll tell you all of the things.
The fun about technology. I'm so excited to have you guys here. Meredith, take it away. Introduce your special friends tonight.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for having us. This is so exciting. Tonight we have with us Christy McClellan, who is our operations or our sales director. I'm the operations manager. We have Kim from the Cheese Lady, and she's here talking about all of our cheeses. And then we have Brian Albrecht, who is our winemaker.
Hi, everyone.
Hi, everybody.
One thing I want to add about Meredith, because I got to know her before Left Foot. We were doing the Wine and Food Festival in Grand Rapids, and she was our volunteer. And at that time, I wasn't necessarily looking for an employee, but I knew I should have my eyes open for possibilities. And she worked kind of a grueling 4-day schedule with me and a friend. And we were really enjoying ourselves and having fun selling wine. And what struck me about Meredith was her organizational ability, her sense of what really had to be done to put off a successful event, and to be able to carry through beyond all of my nonsense and noise. And it's that moment I'm like, I should talk to her about maybe an internship or something. And so, we changed phone numbers, and next thing I know, she's on board, and she's been with us for the better part of over a decade now. And that's always kind of fun to see how people and companies and energies come together and become kind of something better than you ever even thought you could have to start with. So this is very much fun for me as well.
She has dealt with your noise for, almost 12 years, I think.
Right. It's a lot of static, and to weed through and be able to get through. And I love the irony that her internet's not working.
The static.
But it's always fun to have events like this. I mean, we've done these in person, but to also have this ability to get together this way is kind of exciting. So the fun also for me is that I am not in charge of this. And so I've got wines and I've got cheese, and I kind of don't know which direction we're going. And As the winemaker, sometimes we get led into the position like we're supposed to be dictating things, and I love it more when everyone else is telling me what's going on and I get to react. So this will be kind of honest reaction time. So Kim, what have you got?
We've got two cheeses today. We've got Prairie Breeze, which is always one of our go-tos because it just, excuse me, goes with everything so well. Prairie Breeze is it's white cheese. It's cheddar. It's made in Iowa, and it's a really great cheddar because there's a lot of texture to it. So it's got crystals. It's kind of Parmesan-y. And then we have Beamster XO, which is a 2.5-year aged Gouda, which is kind of sweet and nutty. And I think it goes really, really well with a lot of these wines too. So always fun to pair these two. They're almost like they're made for your wine. Truly.
Welcome back, Meredith.
I'm here.
I gave a little backstory of the Grand Rapids experience to kind of set the table for how we got to know each other.
Yeah.
Being a part of the school volunteer corps for the Grand Rapids Wine and Food Festival.
Yeah. I mean, yeah, that's what kicked it all off, right?
Yeah, we had some wine and cheese that day for sure.
Definitely. So should we get started on some wine?
Yeah.
Heck
Yeah, I can kick it off with the dry Riesling if you want, Mare.
Perfect.
So for those of you at home, if you have the dry Riesling, it's a 2017 vintage and all Old Mission fruit in this wine. So you'll see the appellation on there. What's really cool about this wine is that it is a 2017 vintage. It's had enough time in the bottle to start developing some character, some different flavors that it never before had. And I think that's what's so special about a Riesling style where it's true to form, not manipulated, sugars aren't added to it. And I would compliment Brian tremendously on the winemaking efforts that he believes in and practices, is that it's the true expression of the grape. He changes the wines vintage to vintage depending on what Mother Nature gives. And when this one stopped fermenting, it just stopped fermenting, and he didn't try to get it to ferment again. So it fermented out dry, less than 1% residual sugar. I think this one's less than 0.5% residual sugar. So very nice and dry. When Brian and I were tasting this fall in the tasting room, we both thought it was very similar to a nice quality, dry, old world German style Riesling. The Rhine-Hessen region of Germany.
So many internet problems today.
It's very similar.
I think it's the wind.
What I really, really like about the dry Riesling,
it has beautiful.
Sorry, Christy, go ahead.
No, it's okay.
What I love about the dry Riesling is it is so easy to pair with. I love pairing it with different meals. It's my go-to holiday wine because it has a higher acidity and a low enough sugar. It goes really well with the creams and the fats, and that's why it's perfect for things like cheese tastings. It just pairs so beautifully with so many foods. And Riesling too, and people don't always think of this. People don't think of white wines as being able to age, but they can age so beautifully. And this is a great example of that. And it's really just starting to get into some of that really cool, like more developed flavors, and that it's so a younger Riesling will sort of look a little more clear, and an older Riesling can almost like a really light amber almost color, really like a lightish yellow. It's really, really pretty.
It's kind of fun too because Saturday is the recognized birthday of Riesling, and it has to do with a planting that was established in Germany in like the 1400s or something ridiculous like that. And so March 13th is Riesling Day, if you will. Every day is Riesling Day for me, but so it's kind of fun. We're right on the eve of sort of this recognition of how great this incredibly old grape variety is, and that it's been moved all around the world, and it carries a transparency to it that I like to compare it to writing on a quarter or a $50 if you want, where you can take as much ink as you want. You can write on that quarter, and you can try to cover it up, but you'll never cover up the face because Riesling is that way. It's the relief. It is what it is. And as a winemaker, we can try to add colors and different things to it, but we really achieve nothing through that. And so it's really about where it's grown. And one of the things about Left Foot Charley that we set out from the beginning was to try to capture small vineyards and have a chance to work directly with small farms that are putting all their effort into growing fruit and focusing purely on the viticulture side of things. And we work with them towards these goals of making individual wines, which then we take into the cellar. And really our job is to be that of a midwife and just bring it from the grape and carry it through till we can get it to the bottle. And it's not trying to be overly humble. It's more that we're not really adding and concocting recipes and techniques. It's more, I guess techniques is part of it, but it's more the handling of it. We're really trying to just bring the juice, which is full of sugar, let that ferment and get into the alcohol form, and then age to a point where it's really flavorful and respects all that work that the farm did on the front side. Because in the end, we have two things with wine. You have where it's grown and when it's grown, and to have those two factors come together, it's the dirt and it's the year. And so a year like 2017 was a really excellent year for us. We had a succession of a couple of really rough polar vortex vintages, and then we had 2016, which was great, and then 2017 was a little bit questionable. It was a kind of a scary summer. We weren't having a great season, and then all of a sudden in the fall we had this beautiful late bloom of warm weather. The grapes ripened fully. We were able to make a dry Riesling, which we normally cannot do. I think out of our 15, 18 years in business, we have made maybe 4 real dry Rieslings. And so these are very special points within kind of the marker of a winemaker's life to be able to get a chance to do something like this. And I think to consider when it's grown and how that weather impacts the wine is really important too. And we get a lot of credit as winemakers, but it really does come down to the vineyard and the vintage. And that's the thing that I love about what I get to do is I just get to hang out with these cool growers and people that can do things like this. So.
And Brian, can you talk a little bit too about like what makes the Traverse City area so special for growing wine, specifically something like Riesling? Christy was talking a little bit about how this Riesling is similar to one that you can find in Germany, ones that you can find in Alsace. Why can we do that?
Well, I mean, it's the same reasons that why'd you move up here? I mean, was the weather's
the bay
and
the wine,
the water. I mean, really, the Great Lakes in general, Lake Michigan specifically, impacts our weather like nowhere else. If you dry out the lakes, we are South Dakota, Montana, we're mid-continental U.S., and there really is no way we can grow fruit. But you add the water in there, and that adds this buffering effect where we have the water warms up, and it's kind of a heat source, a heat sink, if you will, and it will impact our seasons. We have a delayed spring, which allows us to kind of wait through those frost moments that might come down. We have very warm, sunny summers. They tend to be kind of dry. And then in the fall, after the bay has warmed up and the water is warmed up, as cold air tries to penetrate from Canada, that water provides a little bit of a shield for us and keeps us warmer later than we really should be. We're picking these grapes late October into November. If you go even 20 miles inland from where we're at, you can't grow grapes. It's just too cold. The bay effect, you lose it. So it's a very thin layer along the coast of Michigan that allows us to grow fruit, and that's really what wine is all about. It's growing fruit with a respect for what you can do and what you can grow, and then trying to capture that both at harvest, and then our job again is to capture it in the bottle. Mm-hmm. So everything that we do in northern Michigan is about the water, and without that beautiful luxurious lake right there, we can't do any of this. So I always tell people that if it's a good beach year, if you like to be out on the water, it's a good grape year.
That's a great way to look at it too. So let's taste these with our cheeses too, Kimmy. So we have the two cheeses. We have Prairie.
So the first one is the white one, which is the Prairie Breeze. And it, like I said earlier, is a cheddar. It's a little bit different than a typical cheddar. It has a Parmesan and a Gruyere culture added to it. So that kind of gives it a sweet, kind of nutty flavor. And it has the crystals in it, so it has like a nice texture. It's really crunchy. One of the things I like about this cheese is, like, every wine has a story. Each cheese has a story. And this one in particular, it really is about how, where it comes from, so where the milk comes from. So much of cheese depends on the taste of the milk, and what comes from the milk, what the milk tastes like is from what the animals are eating. And if they're all eating the same thing, or if they're on a single farm. So actually, all of the milk that goes into this cheese is actually pulled from several different farms. So it's more of like a co-op cheese, but it's all actual small family-owned Mennonite farms that are within 15 miles of the creamery. So it's a very, very small area. So the cows are all pasture-fed. They're all feeding the same thing. The soil's the same area. So you get a very consistent flavor, but you're pulling from 6, 7, 8 different creameries, which I think is something that's kind of cool about this cheese. And then the second one, which is the orange one. Yeah. This is Beamster XO. So this is a little bit drier of a cheese. It's actually a Gouda style cheese. And it is sweet and kind of nutty, almost like a butterscotch flavor to it. And I would say out of the two of them, I prefer the Beamster XO, but everybody has a different opinion with this particular wine. I really, really enjoyed that kind of butterscotch flavor that didn't turn too buttery, but really kind of went along with wine. They didn't fight each other either.
Definitely.
Where's the Prairie Breeze grown?
It's Milton, Iowa.
All right.
Which is in the middle of nowhere.
Unless you're from
They
there,
have great cheese.
There's a city there, so like it's just outside of Milton, so it's like one of the cities in Iowa. But yeah, it's kind of out in the middle of nowhere though. Much farm country, Iowa.
So one of the things. Go ahead, Bri.
I was just gonna say I was on a conference last night. It was a lot of fun. There was it was from all around the world. We had the host was from Ireland, and we were tasting with some German winemakers, and the conversation moved very quickly because it was all about Riesling. And right away there were some chefs on. They brought it up to food and this pairing concept. And Trish, the host, was talking about the ability of salt and wine to both kind of create a salivary response, where you have the acid in this dry Riesling makes you kind of want something else. And then you taste this cheese and you get this creamy salt response, which sort of stimulates the same thing. And then you taste the wine with a little bit of acid. How do you like to taste wine and cheese? I mean, to me, that kind of like progression thing is really fun.
Yeah, so I always say wine, cheese, wine. So I like to taste the wine being unaffected by the cheese, because it will be affected by the cheese. And then I like that first sip after I've had the cheese, you still have that flavor of the cheese in your mouth, and they're kind of melding together. And then I think the second sip of wine, really you're getting, it's more of the wine flavor coming back. You're getting, I think, the full essence of how they've either changed each other or they haven't changed each other. There's always those three things that we're trying to accomplish when we're pairing wines and cheeses. They're either going to kind of go along with each other and they're not going to really change, very similar in flavor. or they're going to be very conflicting. So kind of butting heads. You know, you have a really big wine, put a really big cheese with it, just so they can kind of fight with each other, which is always kind of a lot of fun. And then there's the other one where it's, you know, they're kind of different, they're kind of similar, but they really just kind of change each other. So the wine and the cheese both taste very different together. So I'm always kind of looking to see what's going to happen. And that second sip of wine after the cheese is when you usually can kind of tell what's going to happen or what did happen.
Because the whole chemistry of your mouth is changing, right? I mean, you've got an acid environment with the wine, and now you have this cream, salt, base quality going on. It's like you keep, you know, ping-ponging your mouth around it. It's kind
it
of
does. Well, you know, when you get like the fat, so like, you know, bigger cheeses that have like a higher fat content, they'll actually have like bigger fat molecules. It's going to coat your tongue way more. So if you have something that's super acidic, by putting something that's super fatty with it, it'll actually cut down to kind of on that acidity in the in your mouth and in your tongue, because it's those big fat molecules actually just make the wine like glaze right over. They almost protect your tongue from tasting some of the things. So it's some of those things where it's like, it's really magical or it's really not great.
Is there much difference in the fat content between sheep's milk and goat or cow's milk?
Yeah, so sheep, out of like the three main milks, like so milk, goat, sheep, cow. Sheep has the most fat.
Sheep does?
Yeah, yep,
Oh, wow.
yep. So it tends to be a little bit of a sweeter milk. It tends to have a little more nuttiness, whereas like a goat's milk will have like more of a tang or a muskiness even. The sheep's milk tends to be, it's milder, it's sweeter, it's nuttier, but the fat content is super high. The highest is like in the Basque region, like the Pyrenees mountain area. That's that's like the highest fat content, like natural milk out of sheep in the world. And it has to just do with like the sheep have to go up into the mountains in the summer, and then that's where they have all their babies. But to be able to make it back down the trip back down the mountain, they have to have a really high fat content in their milk so that the babies can survive, so that they can survive. So that's just like a natural genetic thing that's happened. So now, even if those cows aren't going back up there anymore, that, you know, or not cows, I'm sorry, sheep, but they tend to have way more fat because of that. So it makes a really rich, beautiful cheeses, though.
That's really cool.
Yeah.
Before we move to the next wine too, we do have a question about fruit in Michigan climate, because Traverse City is famous for cherries. Obviously, we're very famous for our cherries. And somebody wants to know if we work with those flavors in our products at all.
So we don't work directly with incorporating cherries into wine. We're sort of fruit segregationists in that sense. But we do work with a lot of apples. And I think one of the things that's important about the flavors of the fruit in Michigan is the heritage of growing fruit and how long that's been. So we are working with cherry farmers, apple farmers who grow both cherries and apples and grapes all within the same farm, based on where the land really wants to grow, you know, that particular fruit. I'm not opposed to adding, you know, cherry into a wine or apple into a wine. It's just we're in a situation where I really want to explore that more pure expression of those fruits where they're at. Even with our apple ciders, we only make 1 or 2 ciders that have something else infused into it, you know, whether that's ginger or cinnamon, because we really want to honor that fruit that the farmer's growing. And so we don't particularly have a lot of experience with cherry wine. And I had a cherry wine actually the other night from Tom Scheuerman at Seventh Hill Farm, which is one we'll taste later, I think. And it was 13, 14 years old. No, more than that. It was from 1998. Yeah, so it was almost 23 years old. And we all looked at this wine like, yeah, this one won't be very good. And it was outstanding. It was a Montmorency cherry wine. And I wish I had 2 cases of it. It was amazing. So
wow.
We have great respect for the fruit that's grown up here. And I mean, we are the benefactors of that experience of growing cherry trees and apple trees, and it's definitely part of our DNA, but not necessarily in terms of mingling the products.
Great. So our next one that we're going to try is the Missing Spire. I don't know.
All right.
There we go. There we go. Everything is reversed. So the Missing Spire Riesling. And it's really interesting because we actually, depending on what wine and cheese pack you got, you may have gotten the dry Riesling, you might have gotten the Missing Spire, you may have gotten the late harvest Riesling. So the three whites that we have tonight are Rieslings, and they're all so incredibly different. And with the Missing Spire, a couple of things about just the background of this. So Left Foot Charley is within the old state hospital of Traverse City. It's the state hospital. That's where people went for mental health care. Left Foot Charley is in the old laundry facility. And then we also have the barrel room, which is a couple buildings behind the old laundry facility. And that used to be a root cellar. And it was built in 1885. I think it opened in 1888, 89, and closed in 1989. And so we are surrounded by this really amazing history, and these buildings were built to last, and they're so gorgeous. There's one part of the main building, which is building 50, and it is right in the center. And all of building 50 has these beautiful red spires on the top. And in the center of that building, there is a spire that's missing. So, Brian, if you can kind of tell like the little background of that.
Yeah, so the asylum was built on a premise that every room should have light and air, that beauty is therapy. And so if you look at this building, it's got constant angles that meander throughout. It's over a quarter mile long. There's 15 spires on this building. Those spires were used as ventilation chambers because fresh air was very important, and we didn't have forced air systems and filtration and all that back in the 1800s, 1900s. And so to be able to draw air through the building was very important, especially in because they use it for pandemic quarantines and things like that during the influenza outbreaks and TB and things like that. At the center of this building was this grandiose receiving area, because the hospitals were not just for patients, they were sort of the reception places as well. Dignitaries would come to see the investment put in this community and the healthcare and the kind of the progress. It was a sign of a developing community. So everybody would come to what they called Old Main, right in the center of the building. This huge spire would greet you, and you'd have big dinners and things like that. And it was all part of kind of the political and social fabric of the community. But in the 1960s, they were looking at this building. They thought, well, that thing might burn down. Let's tear it down before it does. And so they destroyed the middle of the building because they didn't want to have a fire. So it's kind of like, cutting your ear off to spite your face type thing. And now if you look at it, that whole section of the building is gone. And there's this big gap. It looks like somebody knocked its tooth out. And so I looked at that and I thought, what would that have looked like? And there's rumors around town that if you go on these cold nights in January, when the air gets so cold that it crystallizes and the moon is just right, you can actually still see the outline of the old Missing Spire from the middle of the building. And this wine is formed really at that time period in January, when we're utilizing our natural cold to stop the fermentations. And yeast, grapes come in full of sugar. Yeast are eating that sugar and converting it to alcohol. And if you let the yeast have all of the sugar, there's none left for us to drink. It all goes to alcohol, which can be fun too. But we like to kind of mitigate that and stop the yeast from having all the fun and leave a little bit of natural sugar for us to enjoy. So when you taste a wine from Left Foot that does have residual sugar, it is from the grapevine or from the apple tree. We're not adding back. And it's January when we do that. And that's when those cold nights come. And so we thought it was a really good kind of synergistic thing where it's that time period when these wines are really, truly formed and the balance is created. Because everything about wine is about balance. It's not about how sweet it is or how dry it is. It's how those components work together. And when you taste this wine, especially I think with both of these cheeses, but you're going to get a little different perception. I think with the Gouda, the wine might actually taste a little bit drier, and with the Prairie Breeze, you might get a little more of that fruitiness. And it could be the opposite for everybody's palate, but the reason for that is that you're tasting a wine that's kind of locked into the middle of fermentation, and then we just clean it up and bottle it. It's an old German technique. It's something we've been doing for 2 decades for me. And it's what Riesling really is, why it's so beautiful and so loved around the world.
And speaking of old German techniques, can you talk a little bit about this bottle? So I don't know if you guys can see, this is a beautiful, like antique blue-green bottle with this copper cap. And
everybody
it has a
knows
history.
about the bright blue nun bottles. That's called Cobalt Blue. The bottle that we're using actually disappeared for a long time. It was the common color of Riesling bottles prior to World War I and World War II significantly. Part of what they used to make that blue color was copper. And the copper they needed to make bullets, unfortunately. And so you didn't find that antique blue bottle for a long time. And it came back not too long ago. And I was in Germany tasting with a guy I respect, Andreas Schmidtges, quite a bit. And he had that bottle. And I asked him about it. I said, what is this bottle? And he told me the story about it. Yeah, that was our common bottle until we started using the copper for bullets. And that was a terrible idea. And so we're happy that the copper's back into the bottle and making it blue again. And so it's almost like in essence, like a peace offering or something. And I thought, I make wines. I look to that area of the Mosel for inspiration. I thought, let's try to, utilize that tradition. And so we were able to get the bottles from Germany and put this wine in that package. I thought is kind of appropriate for the style we make, because if anything, our wines lean a little bit in that direction. And that was kind of the inspiration for that.
So the orange cheese that the Beam Strexel, the aged Gouda, kind of the funny thing about the color, all cheeses start out white. Fun fact. So if it's not a white cheese, it's actually been dyed. And most cheeses these days are dyed with like a natural dye, and it's
Is
a
there
little
a
tiny
natural dye you can use for cheese?
Yeah, it's real. Yeah, ick. So it's usually just this little like orangish reddish seed, and it's called an annatto seed. Excuse me. And they use that to dye the cheese. The Beamster XO is dyed with the annatto. But it actually disappeared during the wars also, because they were using it for something else. And they actually converted a lot of the processing to make parts for airplanes and stuff like that. And they were using some chemicals that are used, not chemicals, sorry, the parts of whatever they were extracting from the annatto and during both World Wars too. So a lot of like a traditional would be like a red Leicester. It's got red in its name. It's a bright orange cheese. And during the wars, it was just Leicester. And they didn't call it red Leicester because it wasn't orange anymore. And then when it came back, after it was allowed again, they started making red Leicester again. But they had to call it red Leicester. And they hadn't called it red Leicester before. They just it was just Leicester, and then it turned white, and then it was still just Leicester. And then when they brought it back and started dyeing again, they started calling it red Leicester. And they kept on making both. Same cheese, one dyed, one not dyed.
This is crazy.
On making both.
We've done these tastings with Kim for like 5 years, and I just learned something so new.
Yeah.
Keep it fresh.
Yeah, try.
So like a bag of shredded cheddar cheese that you buy at the grocery store is not supposed to be yellow.
So if it is, look for that word. So it's ANNATTO, annatto. And that's the natural dye. So it will say, if it doesn't say that, it'll say like color whatever, red 106 or whatever it is. I don't know. Yeah. So, but
Number 5.
Yeah, red number 5.
What's
Get in there.
Velveeta got? Where's Velveeta?
I don't know. So used to be that it was not
cheese.
natural, but a lot of cheeses have been
Velveeta's not
switching.
natural?
Yeah, I know. Well, it's definitely not natural, but I mean, even the color was not natural. I don't know if they switched or not, but there might be some plastic in there. It's fine.
I was thinking the one thing of Velveeta that would be natural would be the color, but
Right. The one thing.
So I think, Chrissy, correct me if I'm wrong, we're going to move into that late harvest Riesling next, correct?
Yeah.
Cool. Let's taste it. Late harvest is Kimmy, can you hold up a bottle if you've got one?
Mm-hmm.
Late harvest, our late harvest Riesling.
It's all backwards.
I know, right? It was grown on Seventh Hill Farm on Old Mission Peninsula. It is a really special spot. It's got a glorious south-facing slope, so it gets lots and lots of sunlight, and it can ripen really pretty perfectly. The Seventh Hill Farm is a very prestigious site. Brian's been making wine with them for 20 years or something like that.
Since last century, yes.
Yeah. And the Seventh Hill Farm, in more recent history, within the last 8 years, has won the Jefferson Cup 3 times and got a nomination 1 time. And so the Jefferson Cup is basically like the wine Olympics. You have to be invited to participate. It's a really big deal in the wine world. And wine from that vineyard has gotten the Jefferson Cup multiple times. Brian, if you can talk to us a little bit about late harvest, what does late harvest mean, first of all, and why did we choose to use that term?
So everything about grape maturity and quality comes down to the harvest parameters. And the Germans long ago recognized that and established a whole hierarchy, because that's the way Germans like to do things, of picking dates. And so if you look at a German label, they'll say things like Cabernet or Spätlese or Auslese or Beerenauslese, Trockenbeerenauslese, and on and on and on. And what they're telling you is what was the grape condition when it was picked? How late in the season was it? And the theory is, and the reality is, that the longer those grapes sit on the vine, you're accumulating sugars and you are ripening acids. And it gets to a point where they actually can dehydrate and become raisins. So what we're looking for this on a late harvest style, our concept is we're looking for a single vineyard that has the ability to mature fruit well into the season late, where it can allow the fruit to actually ripen to its peak and then just start to dehydrate. So this was picked from the Seventh Hill Farm, which is it's a 4-acre Riesling vineyard. 2 of those acres were planted in 99 and 2000. And that's what we selected for this particular wine. The younger block, which was planted in 2010, went into a different wine. And we let this one go as long as we could tolerate it. The leaves were turning yellow and starting to fall off. And the berries just started to shrivel up a little bit. And that's when we picked it. It gives us a chance to have a wine that has like full opulent sugars and ripe characteristics, like very soft peaches and pears and apricots, but still maintains very high acidity, so that we can do that same practice I was saying with Missing Spire, where we allow the fermentation to only go to a certain point, and then we stop it with cold and let the yeast fall asleep and leave an ample amount of residual sugar for you to enjoy. And again, balance is the key here. This one is quite sweet. I would say it's traditional in like the American perspective of Riesling, but it has depth and complexity, and it's interesting, and it changes as you taste it, and it will age impeccably. There is all kinds of these types of wines are very difficult to make. They're the riskiest to make because we're asking the farm to leave that fruit out in the elements where it could rot. It could be eaten by birds or deer or raccoons or whoever wants to come through and grab it. And then when we have it in the cellar, it's a harder fermentation. And so sweet wines sometimes are thought of as like, well, you just add sugar to it and, whatever. But for us, these are the hardest wines to make. And we take the greatest risk with this wine, and the rewards are worth it. And when we get one like this from 2019, which is an exceptional vintage from one of the great sites in Michigan, I think if you've ever heard the term Grand Cru, which means like exceptional vineyard, number one, like first, the best vineyards, this would be on the very short list of the Grand Cru sites in Michigan. I would say on Old Mission, there's 4, and this is definitely one of them. And so I've been able to work with them since they planted it. And it's one of my favorite wines to have around the winery because of its history. And if you look at the site, that whole site should have probably been sold to developers to put houses on. And they made a very conscious decision to plant grapes and keep it in agriculture. And that's a big story of Old Mission. We're constantly trying to keep viticulture and agriculture on the forefront against pressures of housing. And this is a very good example of why the land deserves to be into grapes as well as houses. But for this particular site, I'm glad it's grapes and not houses.
Yeah, definitely. And so one thing too, I see that we have a couple of questions, but I wanted, before we get to those questions, if you're going to the store and you're looking at Riesling, obviously we've talked about a very dry Riesling. We've talked about a very sweet Riesling, the Missing Spire, which is kind of on the sweeter side, but kind of between super sweet and then right in the middle. There is something called the International Riesling Foundation, and they have made, again, I don't know, there we go, a scale right there. And so most Riesling bottles, would you say, Bri, have this scale on there.
Any Riesling with integrity does.
So you can see if it's dry, medium sweet, and sweet.
It was a group of writers, winemakers, grape growers, and wineries that wanted to have a way to relate to the customer what this Riesling will present like. And sweet and dry is one thing. That scale is based around some chemistry, and there's 3 parts to it. There's sugar, acid, and then there's impression. And so you have certain latitudes where you can put that arrow. And if you adhere to that and you follow that scale, we are following a system that should vary somewhat consistently across the region, whether that's Austria, Australia, Germany, Michigan, New York, Oregon. Give you an idea of what the balance of that wine is going to be like based on chemistry. And it's the closest thing we've been able to come to helping people understand, because again, the German system involves words that are, longer than my arm, trying to describe when it was picked and what it's like. And right. I can get it, but it's kind of like reading Dwarvish.
So a couple of questions that we got. I'm going to answer the second question first before we open it up to the panel here. Is there anything such as a seasonal wine or better time of year to drink certain wines? To that I say, you drink what you want to drink when you want to drink it with whatever you want to drink it with. There's no right or wrong time to drink a wine. With that being said, traditionally, a lot of people move towards red wines in the winter and white wines in the summer. I mean, there is, I guess, a wine that's very seasonal, like Federweißer, Brian, which is like this partially fermented grape juice.
Yeah, that's when Riesling is actually fermenting. It's only in that state for that period of October in our case. I would say, though, that the white wine in the summer and winter thing is interesting, because I would love to have like a potato leek soup in the middle of winter with a Riesling with a little bit of ham or bacon on there. Mm-hmm. Something warm and, again, rich, and kind of this whole concept of cheese and wine and the richness of the flavors going with the acid of the wine. I think that you have to go with what inspires you. The other thing can be in those really dreary days of March that are coming up, when it's not winter, it's not summer, it's just this purgatory of weather. Something like a brilliant, beautiful, fruity Riesling can make you think about summer and spring and give you that little extra push to get through and know better weather's coming.
I had a pretend beach day the other day with a nice bottle of white wine and some cheese at home, and I just pretended like I was at the beach, put a picture of the beach on the TV, even just let it sit there and sat back. Yeah, because it brings you back to some place, or it brings you to a time, remember, like that's, just love the beach. But yeah, it's nice, like drinking a bottle of that in the winter when it's dragging up here, like we're in the 5th, 10th month of winter right now. I don't know, like.
No, what time doesn't even matter anymore.
No.
Another question we got, and Christy, this might be a good one for you. It seems like a lot of thought goes into making the perfect wine. What would we say is our best seller? Wine, not cider. We know the cider. We'll talk about that later.
Well, yeah, I mean, there are the flagship wines that year after year, Brian's working with the growers to plant, more of certain wines. As far as Rieslings go, I think the Le Caban soared this past summer. If you scramble the letters of that Riesling, it spells out balance. And we've talked a lot about balance in food and wine during this tasting. And that is the perfect balance between the acid, the fruit, and the sugars in wine. And Brian described it as jumping into Lake Michigan on a hot summer day. It's very refreshing and tropical. And it's also that middle balance between, as we were referring to the IRF, or International Riesling Foundation scale, it's right in the middle as far as dry or sweet. So it appeases to a lot of different palates. If you're having people over for dinner, everybody likes it. It's not too dry. It's not too sweet. It's tropical, so it goes with so many foods. That one's been very popular. Our Pinot Blancs, we have 2, which is one single vineyard, Island View, and then one's the Old Mission Peninsula from a combination of vineyards. And the reputation, I think, for Pinot Blanc is phenomenal for Left Foot Charley in the area, in making a traditional style. And our growers are so dedicated to that varietal. I think, that's one that we're going to keep hopefully putting in the ground and planting more, because I want to sell more. And the Blaufränkisch for red grapes, which we're going to get into here shortly. Mm-hmm. Super exciting the way that varietal is taking off. I guess the passion behind it from both the grower side and winemaking side and the consumer side. We keep just hearing more and more requests for it. We get a lot of press and inquiries from wine writers, because it is a unique Austrian varietal that we can do well here. And the new Gamay Noir, I think, though it's not, we only made a small batch, so it's not a top seller, but it's been getting a lot of hype around it. And so I just think that these unique varietals that we're really discovering grow well here are getting a lot of traction and bringing general, I guess, just enthusiasm and excitement about our microclimate up here.
Mm-hmm. So as I've got another question here, and as I'm reading this, let's go ahead and pour our next 2 wines. We've got the Red Drive, and then we also have the 2019 Old Mission Peninsula Blaufränkisch. So Miss Amy, who is my dear friend and was one of my mentors at Ferris in the hospitality program. Hi, Amy.
Hi, Amy. I wrote some letters, I believe.
So she wants to know what time of year is the best to visit our tasting room and experience new releases. So that is a fantastic question. First, just in general, you can visit us all year round. We're open all year. Currently, we're not open on Tuesdays, but that is changing once we get into the summer. We'll be open every single day. And so come and see us. A great time to get the most new releases would be like May, June, I would say. And then August is another good time. Those happen to be the times where we release some wines, though we fairly consistently release most of the time, at least one wine a month, I would say. Would you guys agree?
Yeah, between wine and cider, there's always something, honestly, going on. Like, follow us on Facebook, sign up for our email letters. Our emails, we're not annoying. We only send about once a month to tell you what's going on. And we're pulling things out of the library. Brian has saved some wines to age so we can use them for educational tastings and comparative tastings and food pairings. So honestly, no matter what time of the year it is, we're always thinking of something. We want to share something. We want to bring people education and enjoyment. So there's always something going on. Weekdays are great as far as personal attention. And then we have the barrel room experiences, which you're going to feel like kings and queens for a VIP experience because it's limited, it's small, and you have your reservation and your own table. And
you're literally in between the barrels, like
in the barrel.
It's such a cool spot.
Thanks. Yeah. And you're going to help basically make the wine because you're sitting amongst the wine. They hear your conversation and your excitement. Yeah.
So first, we are going to go ahead and try this Red Drive. And Red Drive, so we learned this actually last week in our sip and snack with the village. So once a month, Left Foot Charley has a sip and snack where we have packs of food, either village food or cheese or whatever it may be. And last week was all about the village, and Red Drive is actually the road that we are on. In the days when it was an asylum, each one of the roads was named a color. So we had Red Drive, we have Yellow Drive, which is what the barrel room's on. There was a Green Drive, brown, and each one of the street signs was an actual color. This is the actual street sign. It's not there anymore. It's on our bottling line now. But they were all the color because there was a lot of illiteracy then. So if you did not know how to read, you could still find Red Drive and you could still find brown and gray. So that is just another nod to this really cool area that we're in. And Brad, can you talk a little bit about the blend on that?
So Red Drive's a wine we make periodically when the vintage allows. We don't have a set blend concept, but it's definitely going to be high in Cabernet Franc, which is the father grape of Cabernet Sauvignon. It grows well up here in Michigan. It is a challenging grape to ripen, and so if we get vintages that are not going to be optimal for this wine, we won't make it, and it goes into something else that we don't have to talk about, or we sell it to somebody else, whatever it is. The idea being we're looking for consistency, and one of the things about being in Michigan is that we're not going to guarantee every vintage is going to be amazing. So when we have those short, cold seasons, anyone who lives in Michigan understands what I'm saying. Those wines we just won't make. And so when you see a wine you like from us, that's the time to enjoy it because it's here. So we've made Red Dry. We did a 7, an 8, we did a 10, and then we did 13, and then 17, and then this one
and 18,
of 18.
Yeah.
So it's periodic, they come around. So it's Cab Franc, Blau Frankish. This particular vintage, we put a little Pinot Noir in to add some cherry fruit to it. Our goal is to have a nice, easy drinking, medium-bodied, fruit-driven red wine. This was aged 20 months in French oak barrels to allow some softening. And the time in barrels is something you can't mimic or add. You just have to let the calendar do the work for you. And it results in a wine that is ready to drink now. It will age very well also. There's a push and a popularity of red wines, and Michigan can do very well with red wines. It's very expensive to grow for the farmer because we have to limit our crop. And then we have this, again, 20 months of barrel time. So they're very difficult to achieve. And that's why we really try to focus those vintages when we can. And again, when the seasons allow, we start to really kind of like rub our hands together, like, all right, we got one here. We can do something like that dry Riesling or, wine like this. Mm-hmm. And so this is the 18. We have not made one since, and I don't know if we'll make one in 21. We'll find out once the season develops. So I can tell you there's not a 19, there's not a 20. There's this one, which is the 2018. Mm-hmm. And they do get very interesting with time. I love wines that have a youthful, energetic presentation when they're first release, and then you can taste and you know that thing's going to go the distance for another decade, and that's the case with this one for sure.
So Red Drive to me, so fun fact, I don't even think I've told you this, Brian. Red Drive was the first Left Foot Charley wine that I had ever had. And I found a bottle of it at Martha's in Grand Rapids. And I went and grabbed it when we went to have dinner with my parents. And I was like, this guy agreed to interview me for a job. I should try his wine. So I went and picked it up. And it's always been one of my favorite reds because to me, it's just a very smooth, easy drinking wine. I went off book tonight, and Kim gave me some cheese snacks yesterday. So I have this Tennessee whiskey Bellavitano. Oh my God.
And you did not give me any of this today?
I tried to text you. It's so good. If you have a cheese lady by you, and if you live in Michigan, you definitely have one within at least 100 miles. So jump in the car. They have hundreds of cheeses for you to try, like this.
So, that would be so good with that.
Yeah, I was gonna say. So the whiskey, like, do you get is it awesome because of the barrel thing, or what's going on in your mouth, lady?
I don't even know.
So I can tell you it's like a cheddar base and it has like a cheddar texture, but they put a Parmesan culture in there. So it literally tastes like Parmesan. Yeah. Take all of that, but then wash the outside with whiskey, like heavily with whiskey, and you get like this rind. So it's just on the outside, and it's like that. It tastes like whiskey, but it's like it's
well, when it's with the wine.
Yeah,
I get a lot of like dark cherry, maybe some blueberry or something like that. Something like really, really ripe. Lots and lots of fruit in it. Like it's a lot more fruit forward than it already is. And then like the crystals in it too. Like it's got little crystals that happen when the cheese ages, and add some amazing tastes to the red wine, or to any wine really. Is so good. It sounds
like a party in your mouth, like a college party. Whiskey, wine,
at Ferris.
Crystals. I don't.
It's like Big Rapids.
Go Bulldogs.
So can we talk a little bit too about this 19 Blaufränkisch?
Brian, do you have a puppy by your ankles? Because if so, you need to show it on camera now.
I did, but she just walked away, so I don't know.
I heard her whimper, and I want to see her. Okay, bring the puppy back. In the meantime, tell us about your son's label real quick before jumping into the wine.
Mm-hmm.
All right, so Blaufränkisch is a red grape that we planted back in 2002. In our quest to find red grapes that would thrive in northern Michigan. Because it's one thing to grow red grapes, it's another thing to have red grapes that are successful. And we were on the hunt for what would be a very smart grape to plant, both from the wine perspective, but from the farm perspective as well. And so Blaufränkisch was an experiment. It went really well over the decade and a half. And so, sorry, the dog is barking again, or whining. So we've been on this pursuit, and when for a while we just put Blaufränkisch on a white label because we didn't know what to do in terms of we were still experimenting. And my son was very much into runes and like secret languages and stuff, and so he took Norse runes and combined the letters into 7 qualities that he felt represented himself, which are on the back label. I don't want to go into them right now. And it was very intriguing to me because instead of doing it linearly, he stacked them on top of each other. And our resident artist, the artist Bird, took Blaufränkisch wine and actually painted his design for this label. And it's our one of our favorite wines that we've got in the house. Blaufränkisch is an Austrian red grape that loves northern Michigan. It's got a lot of black pepper and blueberry and kind of brambleberry spices to it. You can make it in a style like this one we have here, which is meant for early release and more of a fruit-driven kind of primary visceral fruit quality. And you can also age it very long in barrels and get more of a reserve, kind of drawn out, more austere style wine as well. And so it depends on where it's grown. We have 5 vineyards currently, which that way contribute to our Blaufränkisch program. And it's become one of the hot grapes, not because of us necessarily, but it's being discovered around the country as a very cool old school grape that is getting a kind of a new perspective from drinkers and winemakers alike.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of hype around the grape right now up here because, like you said, it's Austrian, so it likes the cool climate. It grows well. It has these innate spice characteristics to it. And I know that barrels contribute a little bit or sometimes enhance it, but I mean, it's just, it has like that clove, that baking spice, like you said, the brambleberry, blackberry. This is such a unique wine. It's so different than anything else. And it's really fun when people come into the tasting room or the barrel room and they're looking for a fuller bodied red, to be able to explain, our climate. We can't do Syrahs and Zinfandels and like real hot climate wines, but we can produce these very distinct climate-driven varietals that express themselves in only the way that our terroir and our cooler climate could do that. And I think this is one. It just has very, very unique quality spices. It's complex. It's interesting. It's got a nice earthiness to it. So somebody looking for a lot of flavor, I mean, it nails it. And this wine ages so well.
There was a period in American wine drinking when, red wines were expected to be bombastic, loud, brash, over the top, high alcohol, opulent, just laying on top of you constantly. And the reality is that one of the beauties of red wines is its elegance and its ability to kind of weave through a table and the food. It should still have this ability to sit on the table and pair with things like cheeses, like seafood, like delicate meats, vegetables, and flavors, and be kind of enhance the meal experience. And we're getting back, fortunately, to a time when lower alcohol, more refined red wines are being appreciated again, and Blaufränkisch fits right into that wheelhouse. It's like a heavy Pinot Noir, somewhere between Pinot and Syrah, where it's got delicacy, it's got layers of flavor, it has massive upside aging potential, and it's natural to our environment too. So there's nothing concocted about this. And one of the things that our big secret, if you want, our winemaking secret on Blaufränkisch, use old barrels. Don't use brand new oak. We use some new oak, but it's a very low percentage because oak is a tricky mistress. It can really enhance things, but it can also dominate. And with this wine, it doesn't need domination. It needs a little bit more of a kind of just a hand to pull up and be able to like help support the fruit that's there. And that's sort of our trick with this one. It's about 20% new oak. So
I feel like the words you used all together were like great. It was so funny.
It is. I didn't make them up.
No, it was all good. It's really just watching Christy's face. It just sent me over the edge.
Tricky mistress. It's just great.
Yeah, I mean, oaks are, I mean, it's the whole thing with winemaking in general. There's always this opportunity to utilize tools and technology to make an impact on a wine. And if you're doing that, you sort of start to rely on your tricks. We call it, the dark arts as well. You can use black magic and like smoke and mirrors and type things. But when you have an environment like ours and the ability to grow these types of varietals, we don't have to do that. We let it come through on its own, and that's why we make wine.
So what you need to know, Ferris World, is that Left Foot Charley can ship right now to, I think it's 38 states. And so you can get online at www.leftfootcharley.com and order some of these fantastic wines if you did not have the chance to do so already. We also do distribute all over Michigan, Chicagoland, New York, New Jersey,
Texas.
DC, Maryland, Texas, Virginia. I think I got it all right.
Yeah.
It's a lot.
Might have signed up Kansas City last night, but
Fingers crossed. So is there any last minute things like Brian?
I have one thing to say about Ferris.
Yes.
Because one of the things we don't talk enough about, we've talked a lot about our vineyard development, all the investment that's gone on in how we establish our vineyards. The wineries themselves, we've been putting a lot into the equipment and the personnel and the training of winemakers and vineyard growers. And it's a big reason why Michigan wines are starting to get national and international prominence. But what's happened in the last several years is that we are realizing the importance of hospitality and how much it matters how the wine is delivered, because we can do all this work in the vineyard, all the work in the cellar, and what we end up with is a bunch of dusty bottles. Because if it doesn't get out to the people, it doesn't matter. If the wine falls in the forest, does anybody hear it, right? And so what I appreciate about getting Meredith on board and Christy and our whole staff is that they are delivering this wine that we work so hard on with such grace and elegance, even more so than the winemaking and the vineyard growing. And that is kind of an exciting part of what's happening in northern Michigan. We've gone from a cottage industry to a very professional, experience-based industry. And the way our wines are being shared right now is humbling. And as someone who's really only in the cellar in the vineyard, I am absolutely humbled and proud to be working with such professionals. And so I think what is happening there at the university is only going to garner more desire and future upside for our industry and the restaurant and hospitality industry in general. So I'm very grateful.
Thank you, Brian. That's great. Kim and Christy, do you guys have anything? Can you follow that?
No.
No, it's been really fun. Kim, I learned so much from you. Every time that we do this, we learn something new. And it's so neat, just the agricultural tie of the animals and the terroir, what the animals are eating, about
the color.
Them living. Living in the mountains and needing to store fat, and that changes the profile. I mean, it's so assimilates to, our different vineyards and everything. So that was super fascinating. Thank you for spending time with us tonight. I learned something. I thought your cheeses are always amazing. And every time I go in your shop, I learn something and try something new, and it's fabulous. And Meredith, your expertise and your experience with Ferris and the alum, it's just so fun to share with everybody. Honored to be a part of the team, and to showcase Brian and our growers' hard work is phenomenal. It's just fun to be able to share. And
always a pleasure. Always a pleasure.
Awesome. With that, I think we're done. But Brandy, if you want to jump on and we can wrap this up, that'd be fantastic.
Gosh, thank you guys so much. Kim, Christy, Meredith, Brian, this was fantastic. Great presentation. I know I'm enjoying both my Missing Spire and the Late Harvest tonight. It's been fantastic sipping and listening to all that you have to talk about. We've learned so much, about the wines and Left Foot Charley. And I just hope that I can make my way north this summer and try some more varieties. So thank you for taking me. All right, I'm on my way. If I could leave tonight, I would, but maybe give me a couple more months and then I'll be up that way. So
that sounds
thank
fair.
you all again. I appreciate your time tonight.
Thank you so much. It was wonderful. Thank you.
Thank you. Cheers. As a reminder, if you missed any part of the presentation or would like to go back and review a section, the demonstration will be found beginning tomorrow on this website under past events or on our Facebook page at Ferris Alumni. Also, we would love to hear how you enjoyed the presentation or perhaps your favorites this evening from Left Foot Charley. So feel free to share a comment or even a picture of your favorite wine on Facebook. As an extra bonus, we are having an additional March Alumni Social Hour. Make sure to check out our registration page for the details on A Smokin' Good Time, Meet Smokin' Tips and Techniques. This presentation will be in 2 weeks, Thursday, March 25th at 7 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, and brought to you by our alum, Casey Payne. Casey is a 2008 graduate of Ferris State from the Construction Technology and Management program, who turned his hobby of meat smoking and barbecue competitions into his very own business, his barbecue company and specialty brand of spices. So for more information on the meat smoking virtual event, you can find that on our website at ferris.edu/alumni. Always a pleasure. Thanks, Bulldogs. Have a great evening.